Greetings, Internet faithful. I'm some guy named Rob, and this is the 5-Minute Podcast. So, have you read any good books lately? Not in the biblical sense, of course, as even the abridged King James Version is not only the physical manifestation and possible Platonic ideal of the term TLDR, but like most fan fiction, it suffers from inconsistent pacing, underdeveloped and unrealistic characters, poor narrative structure, dialogue that stretches credulity, plotlines that come out of nowhere and fail to resolve before being dropped entirely, and a fanbase that is only slightly less spurious and vexatious than the throng surrounding the 50 Shades franchise. We will now observe a moment of silence while the devil himself prepares a special place in hell for yours truly for having to parse that previous run-on sentence. About 3 months ago, I reviewed You're Not Dead by Jason Gardner, a semi-autobiographical story that was a fascinating take on the 5 stages of grief, all wrapped into a lean 100-ish page novella that was a short read, but nothing one could reasonably call a light read. It was deep, introspective, weighty, and really threw the ableism of modern society into sharp relief. I also recommended it on those very merits, and still do in fact. Links in the description and comments of the video. Today's book, Strays, Part 1, by Magdalene Wyatt, is something one would call a tiger of a different stripe if one had a fetish for outdated and overused turns of phrase. It too clocks in at a breezy 100-ish pages, but unlike the pervasive feelings of angst and creeping malaise that made turning to each new page of You're Not Dead a challenge, Strays makes use of intrigue and some very interesting juxtaposition that compels the reader to let themselves be swept along with the momentum of the mystery and turn to the next page until they reach the end of Part 1. An end, I may add, that actually builds to a proper cliffhanger via carefully constructed raising of the stakes within the plot, creating a genuine ratcheting of tension. I'm hesitant to get into more detail about the book, partly because no one should have a good mystery spoiled for them, but mostly because the author literally runs a YouTube channel with a strong emphasis on media literacy, and at best any serious attempt at analysis is going to make me feel like I'm trying to mansplain the author's book back to her, which is not how anyone with a shred of awareness or hint of self-respect wants to be famous on the internet. What's that? The author's use of opening on a flashback is not only used to quickly establish the group dynamic of the novel's core characters before throwing the recklessness of their youth in sharp contrast against the sobering reality of day-to-day adulthood, but is also used to set the core conflict of the first part of the novel in action? The devil, you say! You'd almost think the author had more than a decade's experience meticulously constructing several dozen video essays on media literacy, deconstructing everything from classic Fritz Lang movies to modern anime, with stops along the way to discuss memetics and social media thrown in for flavor. How about you flex that galaxy-sized Chad brain of yours to tell the author about how she used dream sequences to explore the metaphor of the protagonist's fears for the future, you fucking mouth-breathing troglodyte? Of course, at the other end of the idiot spectrum would be me making an honest attempt and then completely whiffing on earnestly tackling the underlying themes and metaphors, and making myself look like an absolute colossal tool in the process, and, actually, now that I think about it, that's kind of on brand for most of the things I do on here. Moving on. Cheap cop-outs aside, I will commend the author, or Magdalene, if I may, and I may because I asked in advance for her permission to call her that out of fear that her legion of tens of thousands of YouTube and TikTok fans might do something unreasonable and drastic, such as watching my videos and subscribing to my YouTube channel, hint hint, of not falling into the trap of trying to write teen dialogue stuffed to the tits with slang to make the character seem more relatable. Few things age more poorly or feel more stilted, contrived, and pandering than slang-heavy teen dialogue. Regardless of how period-appropriate the words themselves are, and how much care one takes in regards to tone, the end result almost never comes out as expected and is often a complete embarrassment, like the results one would expect by trying to give someone a haircut over the phone. I have no idea what that means, in case you're wondering. Back to the positive side of things before this gets completely away from me and Magdalene unconditionally regrets sanctioning this review. It was only after a second full read through the text and noticing things like the lack of cringe-inducing dialogue, as well as a couple of other very interesting little details sprinkled across Part 1 that it dawned on me. This was a low-key literary love letter to Vaporwave, and a genuinely enjoyable one at that. I'm not allowing this specific train of thought to pull away from the station until the passengers have fully boarded. No, I don't know what that means, stop asking. And I'd like to give Magdalene a chance to respond to let me know if this is meant to be canon, if this is just my going full-on headcanon, Or, given the rest of this review so far, I should just be shot out of a cannon. It's totally going to be the third one, isn't it? This has been the 5 Minute Podcast.